His hand clenched my shoulder tight. Too tight. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," he hissed, dragging me down the hallway. I stumbled, breathless, as he shoved open the front door and flung my suitcase into the rain. "No one's going to care what happens to you now." The words cut deeper than the bruises. I stood there, soaked, shaking, watching the door slam shut. What happened to the boy I raised? And why did being sick make me disposable? If you want to know what happens next, stay with me until the end of the video. And if you still believe deep in your heart that God is always watching over you, silently arranging everything, then right now, leave a comment saying AMEN below this video. Because who knows, at the very moment you write those words, a blessing may quietly enter your life. I still remember the sound of the clock ticking in the doctor's office that Tuesday morning in March 2023. It was the kind of silence that settles into your bones, the kind that makes even your own breath feel too loud. I was 62, and I thought I knew what loneliness felt like. But I was wrong. Real loneliness is sitting in that cold, sterile oncology office while a doctor gently tells you that you have stage 2 breast cancer, and there's no one sitting beside you to squeeze your hand or even pretend to be brave with you. Just me and my trembling purse strap, which I clutched like it could somehow hold me together. When the doctor said the word cancer, I felt like I'd dropped through the floor. His lips kept moving, talking about treatment plans, chemotherapy cycles, support systems, but the words came out muffled, like he was speaking through water. I nodded politely, even smiled a little, like someone discussing a leaky faucet instead of their own mortality. The first thing I did when I got back to the car was try to call my son, David. At 38, he was a rising star in finance, always dressed in slim suits and always in a meeting. I stared at his name on the screen for a full minute before hitting the call button. "Mom, I'm in a meeting," he answered without even a hello. "Can this wait?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "David, I need to tell you something important. I just came from the doctor and... Look, whatever it is, can you text me? I've got back-to-back calls all afternoon." And then he hung up. I didn't cry right away. Not in the parking lot, not even on the drive home. But the moment I stepped through the front door of the house I'd lived in for over 20 years, the house where I raised David, where I held my husband's hand as he died from pancreatic cancer 8 years ago, I sank to the floor and wept like I hadn't since the funeral. It wasn't the cancer that broke me. It was the silence. My first chemotherapy session was scheduled for the following Thursday. I packed a bag like I'd read online. Water bottle, warm socks, paperback novel I wouldn't be able to concentrate on. I wore a soft sweater and lip balm to keep from drying out, just like the nurse had recommended. What I hadn't prepared for was walking into that bright, impersonal treatment center completely alone. Around me were patients with their spouses, their adult children, their friends. Laughter, quiet reassurances, murmurs of, "You're so strong." No, I sat alone, staring at the IV as the nurse, her name was Carla, I think tried to make conversation. "Is someone picking you up today, honey?" she asked gently. I lied and said, "Yes, just running a bit late." She gave me a look. Not judging, just sad. The kind of look you give a stray dog who insists they're fine out in the rain. 3 hours later, I drove myself home, gripping the steering wheel like it might run away from me. That night, I called again. This time, it was Claire, my daughter-in-law, who answered. Claire was always polite, always perfectly composed, always a little too sweet in a way that made my teeth ache. "Oh, Helen," she said, voice dripping with something like sympathy. "David's at the gym right now. Is everything okay?" "I started chemo today," I said quietly. A pause. Then, "Oh my God, wow. When did you find out?" 2 weeks ago. I've been trying to reach David, but, well, you know how busy he island? And, yes, she said with a sigh. We're all just so swamped. The promotion, Liam's soccer schedule, my mother's back acting up. It's just been non-stop. I was hoping you could come by this weekend. Maybe bring Liam. I'd love to see him. Another pause. This weekend's a bit tricky. We have David's work event, and Liam's got a game, and I promised my mom we'd visit. But let's figure something out soon, okay? Soon never came. Week after week, I sat in that chair. Alone. No calls, no visits, no casseroles, no offers to help. The nurses became my only human contact. I learned their names, they learned how I took my tea, and as the weeks passed, and my hair began to fall out in clumps, I realized something. My body was fighting cancer, but my heart was fighting something even crueler, being forgotten by the people I loved the most. By week 4, the worst of the nausea had settled into a dull, constant hum in the back of my body. I learned how to breathe through it. I learned how to sip ginger tea slowly enough that it wouldn't come back up. I learned how to shower without looking directly in the mirror. But nothing prepared me for the day I woke up with hair on my pillow. Not strands, chunks. I'd read about it, of course. Hair loss is a known side effect of chemo. But no one tells you how intimate that loss feels. It's not just hair, it's your identity unraveling one silent strand at a time. I stood in the bathroom, holding a handful of what used to be part of me. Brown and gray, thin, but mine. And now, scattered across my hands and my sink, it looked like something that belonged to a stranger. I picked up the phone and called David again. He answered on the 4th ring, breathless. "Mom, I told you, I'm in meetings all morning," he snapped. "My hair," I said quietly. "It's all coming out. I stopped, because the image in the mirror was too much to describe. I just needed to talk to someone. He sighed, long and tired, like I was a child interrupting his work. "Look, that's normal with chemo, right? It'll grow back. You're going to be fine. I'll call you tonight, okay? We've got this big presentation to the board and—" "Never mind," I whispered and hung up. That afternoon, I drove myself to a small wig shop across town. The saleswoman was kind and patient. Her name was Tanya. She didn't ask questions. She just handed me options and nodded gently when I rejected each one. "This one's close to your natural color," she said, placing a soft, layered wig into my hands. It felt like wearing someone else's head. But I bought it anyway, $230 I didn't really have to spare. I wore it home, looked in the mirror, and stared at a stranger in Helen Parker's skin. Over the following months, the rhythm of cancer became my life. Blood tests, scans, infusions, a language of numbers and side effects. I carried anti-nausea pills like breath mints. I had creams for the sores that formed in my mouth, gloves for the numbness in my fingers, and a playlist of classical music that I played in the treatment room to keep the panic at bay. But what I didn't have, what never came, was the call. The one from David, or Claire, or Liam. The phone stayed silent. Not even a voicemail. Not a thinking of you, Mom. Not a how can we help. I checked the mailbox every day. Maybe a card? A letter? Something? It remained empty, except for medical bills and supermarket coupons. The silence hurt more than the sickness. I began talking to myself in the evenings, just to hear another voice in the house. I left the television on for company. Sometimes, I would pretend that I had forgotten to check a message, just to give myself an excuse to open my phone. And then, around month 6, something changed. A plain white envelope arrived in the mail. Inside was a letter from a law office in Santa Barbara. My brother Samuel had passed away. A heart attack, sudden. No funeral. No warning. We hadn't spoken in over a year. We'd argued after our mother died over something so small, so petty. I can't even remember the details now. I'd assumed we'd make up eventually. But life doesn't always leave room for eventually. And yet, despite everything, Samuel had left me everything. Not just a box of trinkets or old records. He left me his house. The house, a beachfront property in Malibu that I'd visited only once when I was a teenager. I remembered big windows, salt in the air, and the sound of waves echoing through the hallways. According to the letter, the house was fully paid off and recently appraised at over $2 million. Along with it came investment accounts, a sizable insurance policy, and more than enough for me to live comfortably for the rest of my life. I sat on the edge of my bed, letter in hand, and wept not because of the money, but because my brother, whom I hadn't spoken to in a year, had done more for me in death than my own son had done while I was alive and fighting. And just like that, everything changed. In February 2024, I finished treatment. My oncologist said the words, remission, and excellent response. And I nodded like a good patient, but my heart wasn't in it. I didn't want to celebrate. What was there to celebrate? I'd survived, yes, but I'd survived alone. I packed my things slowly. 27 years in the same home, raising a family, burying a husband, building a life. I boxed up the Christmas ornaments David had stopped coming home to hang. The photo albums Claire always said she'd help digitize someday. The drawings Liam had made before he forgot I existed. The moving truck arrived on a cloudy Saturday morning. I stood in my empty living room, stared at the blank walls, and realized I hadn't heard from David in over 3 months. The house in Malibu was everything I remembered. Big windows, warm Sunday real wood floors that creaked in comforting ways, and silence. But this time, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt clean. For the first time in years, I breathed. Really breathed. I cooked for one. I read books. I watched the ocean. I started a small garden in the back. I spoke to neighbors, friendly people who brought over fresh herbs and cookies, people who asked how I was and meant it. And for 6 whole weeks it was peaceful. Until the doorbell rang. It was a Tuesday, mid-morning. I was barefoot in the kitchen, holding a cup of coffee, when I heard it. I wasn't expecting anyone. I hadn't shared my new address with David or Claire. Through the frosted glass of the front door, I saw a silhouette. Feminine. Familiar. My heart thudded in my chest. I opened the door, and there she was. Claire. Perfect makeup. Designer dress. Impossibly white smile. Doreen, she said, using the name she never used unless she was performing. Oh my God, you look amazing. She swept forward as if nothing had happened, as if the last 2 years had been a bad dream. And I, standing in my brother's $1 million beach house, hair slowly growing back, stronger than I'd ever been looked at, the woman who'd abandoned me during my darkest days. And I smiled. I'm glad to have you here, I said. Because I was. I was glad she came. Because now, I would finally get the answers I deserved. She stepped over the threshold like she owned the place, her eyes dancing over every detail, woodwork, the crystal light fixtures, the view of the ocean through the floor to ceiling windows. This place is incredible, Claire said breathlessly. I mean, just wow. You didn't tell us Uncle Samuel was living like a movie star. I didn't answer right away. I was still watching her. Not her dress, not her hair, both perfect, as always, but her eyes. They were scanning the room like a real estate agent appraising a listing. Calculating, assessing. I'd seen that look before. At family gatherings, at school functions. It was the same expression she wore when picking out jewelry at a sale, something she wanted but didn't want to seem like she wanted. Coffee? I offered, if only to buy time. That would be lovely, she said, placing her purse on the marble counter and sliding onto a bar stool with practiced ease. I moved to the kitchen and began brewing a fresh pot. You look so healthy, Claire continued, watching me carefully. Radiant, even. I mean, after everything you've been through, cancer, chemo, I was just so worried about you. Were you? I wanted to say. Where were you then? But I stayed silent, let her talk, let her reveal herself. She sipped the coffee I handed her and smiled. That same smile, bright, wide, empty. David and I have been meaning to reach out, she said, voice syrupy. We were just giving you space. You know, after the treatments and all, we figured you might need time to heal. 2 years of silence. That's what she was calling space. Is Liam well? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. Her smile faltered for half a second. Oh yes, of course. Growing like a weed. He's obsessed with soccer. David's coaching his team now. I nodded. He must be what, 9 now? Almost 10, she said, and quickly corrected herself. Well, 9.5. End quote. She hadn't expected that question. Probably didn't think I was keeping count. But I had. Every day, every birthday, every missed milestone. Has he asked about me? I asked. Claire's face softened an act, but a good one. She was practiced. He does, actually, all the time. He misses you. We all do. I didn't say what I was thinking. That if he'd missed me, he could have called, or written, or asked to visit. Instead, I gave her a soft smile. That's nice to hear. There was a beat of silence. Then she leaned forward, placing her manicured hand over mine. Helen, I want to say something, and I hope you'll hear me with an open heart. Here it comes, I thought. We weren't there for you the way we should have been, and I hate that. We all do. But it wasn't out of malice. Life just got so heavy. David's job. Liam's issues at school. My mother's hip surgery. We were drowning in things we didn't know how to manage. So was I thought. Only I was drowning in poison they were pumping into my veins. We thought maybe it was better to give you space than to show up and say the wrong thing, she continued. But now that we've reconnected, I think it's time we start fresh. There it was. The word that meant nothing and everything. Fresh. Start fresh, I echoed. She nodded, encouraged. Yes, spend more time together. Liam would love to visit the beach house. Maybe even stay over sometimes this summer? She said it so casually, like it was a play date, not the first mention of him in over 2 years. That's a lovely idea, I said. But how did you find me? I didn't share my new address. Claire's smile faltered for the second time. Oh, you know David. He's good with that sort of thing. Property records, mailing lists, it wasn't hard. Right. Because nothing says concerned family like tracking someone down through real estate records. She shifted gears. So, how have you been managing things? The estate? The house? The finances? It's a lot for one person. I can't imagine how overwhelming it must be. And there it was, the real reason she came. Not to say sorry. Not to check on me. To see if I was capable. To see if they still had a chance to take over. I took a slow sip of my coffee and kept my face calm. It's been surprisingly smooth, I said. Samuel had everything organized. His estate attorney has been wonderful. I've had no trouble managing things. Still, she pressed. I imagine it's hard keeping up with all the details. Taxes, maintenance, investments. I looked at her directly. Claire, is there something specific you're trying to ask me? She blinked. Caught. No, of course not, she said quickly. Just, if you ever need help navigating any of this, David and I would be more than happy to step in. We care about you. We just want what's best. Best for who? I appreciate that, I said gently. Truly. We sat in silence for a while. The waves crashed in the background. Her coffee went cold. Then, as she stood to leave, she said the line I'd been waiting for. You look amazing, Helen. Really. I'm just so glad to see you thriving. Thriving. She meant functioning. She meant not confused. She meant not legally incapacitated. I smiled and walked her to the door. As she stepped out onto the porch, she turned back with that brilliant, blinding grin. We should plan something for next weekend. Liam would love to see you. And David could use a break. He's been under so much pressure lately. It'd be good for him to unwind here. Of course it would. Let me think about it, I said. She gave a cheerful wave and walked to her white BMW. I watched her drive away, knowing exactly what phone calls she'd be making the moment she pulled out of my driveway. David, she'd say. She's stable. The house is real. And I think she still doesn't know. But I did know. And what they didn't know yet was that I was no longer the woman they thought they could control. I was done being silent. And this time, I would be ready. 3 days after Claire's visit, I was sipping coffee on the back deck when Mary Evans walked up the path with Buddy, her old golden retriever trotting beside her. "I thought I'd bring the morning gossip," she said with a chuckle, setting her mug beside mine. "That fancy-looking lady of yours cornered me at the mailbox the other day." My stomach tightened. "Claire?" Mary nodded, her tone shifting. "Blonde, perfect nails, perfume like a Macy's counter exploded. That her?" "That's her." "Well, she was. Inquisitive, let's say. Asked a whole bunch of questions about you. How long you've lived here, how you're doing health-wise, whether you ever get confused or forget things." I froze. "Confused?" I repeated. Mary took a slow sip of her coffee, watching me. "She said your family was worried, that after everything you've been through, they're concerned about your decision-making capacity." That was the phrase she used. I sat back in my chair, the ceramic mug warm in my hands, but my blood had turned cold. "She's building a narrative," I said quietly. Mary raised her eyebrows. "Honey, that woman was casing you like a bank." We sat in silence for a moment. Buddy sniffed around the deck, oblivious. Then Mary leaned closer. "She didn't like my answers, for what it's worth. I told her you were the sharpest woman I'd met in years, and that if they were so worried, maybe they should have been around during chemo." "Thank you," I said, throat tight. She patted my hand. "You've got more sense in your little finger than most people have in their whole body. Don't let them gaslight you." But the gears in my head were already turning. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling fan turning slowly above my bed and thought about every little sign I'd ignored, every awkward question, every time Claire had changed the subject when I mentioned medical updates, every time David had dismissed my concerns. I rose before dawn and drove back to my old neighborhood for the first time in months. I needed to know what else they'd been doing behind my back. First stop, Mrs. Rodriguez, my old neighbor. "Doreen?" she said, surprised to see me. "You look so healthy." "Praise God. I'm doing better," I said. "But I need to ask you something." She invited me in, and over tea at her kitchen table, I asked the question that had been burning inside me. "Did Claire ever come by asking questions about me?" Maria's smile faded. "Yes, actually. A few times. She seemed very concerned, said the chemotherapy might have been affecting your memory. She asked if you'd seemed unstable or forgetful." My fingers curled around the teacup. "She said the family might need to step in." Maria continued, her voice low. "Talked about assisted living options. Wanted to know if I thought you could still live alone." "And what did you tell her?" I asked. Maria looked me in the eye. "I told her you were tougher than nails, that you were managing everything yourself, and that she should be ashamed for not visiting more often." I thanked her and left with my hands shaking. Next stop, the local grocery store. Tom, the manager, had always been kind during my treatments. When I asked him if Claire had come by, he hesitated. "Yeah," he said finally. "She came in a few times. Said your family was worried. Wanted to know if we'd noticed you acting confused, making strange purchases, forgetting things at checkout." I stared at him. "And what did you say?" He looked offended. "I told her you were polite, clear, and never once acted like anything was wrong." Honestly, she seemed disappointed by that. By the time I got home, my head was pounding. I called my oncologist's office next. Susan, the nurse who'd taken care of me during treatments, picked up. "Doreen, we were just talking about you. How are you feeling?" "Susan, did anyone from my family ever call asking about cognitive effects of treatment?" There was a pause. "Yes," she said slowly. "Your daughter-in-law called a few times, asked if we'd noticed any memory loss or confusion. Said the family was worried about your decision-making, but we told her there were no signs of cognitive decline whatsoever. Dr. Mitchell even noted how engaged and independent you were." I thanked her and hung up. I stood in the middle of my living room, the ocean humming in the background, and stared at nothing. It wasn't just a few questions, it was a campaign. Claire and probably David too had been planting seeds of doubt everywhere. Quietly, methodically, laying the groundwork. But groundwork for what? I got my answer the next day. I was sorting through old files from the move medical bills, property records, receipts when I found it. A manila envelope marked personal, no return address. Inside was a photocopy of a legal document, a petition, Marcus Parker versus Helen Parker, filed in late 2023, 8 months into my treatment. It was a petition for guardianship. David had gone to a lawyer, claiming that I was no longer mentally competent to manage my affairs. Attached were sworn statements from Claire, describing supposed incidents of confusion bills left unpaid, missed appointments, even false claims about me getting lost while driving. All of it lies. At the bottom, a note from the attorney. Insufficient evidence of incapacity. Need medical documentation or witness testimony. Recommend gathering more before filing. My hands trembled. They'd planned to take control of my life. My money. My house. While I was fighting for my life, I sat there for a long time, the document open on my lap. Then I stood up, walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and made 2 phone calls. The first was to Patricia Chen, a lawyer recommended by Mary Evans, a woman known for her tenacity and her track record in elder law. The second was to Sandra Walsh, the attorney who handled Samuel's estate. As I spoke to them both, a strange thing happened. I stopped feeling like a victim. I stopped feeling powerless. I started feeling something else entirely. Focused. Prepared. Because now, I knew exactly what I was up against. And this time, they weren't going to see me coming. The call came at 7:41 p.m. on a Thursday. I was in the middle of organizing the file folders Patricia had helped me prepare. They were crisp and color-coded. Medical records, legal documentation, estate paperwork all ready, just in case I needed them. When I saw David's name flash across the screen, my heart didn't jump. It didn't even stir. Not anymore. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hi, Mom," he said, voice unusually soft. "Claire said she had a great visit the other day. She was really happy to see you doing well." I replied. There was a pause, like he expected me to say more. "She said the house is beautiful," he continued. "Uncle Samuel really left you something special." "Yes," I said calmly. "He did." Another pause. I could practically hear him trying to decide how to slide into the topic he really wanted to discuss. "We were thinking," he began slowly, "maybe we could come by this weekend. Bring Liam, spend a little time with you, catch up." Oh, and there it was. 2 years of silence. No visits, no support. Now they wanted to catch up. "Saturday?" I said, as if I hadn't already expected this. "Yes, Saturday would be perfect. Claire's so excited. Liam keeps asking about you. He's going to be thrilled." "I'm sure he is," I said. "See you then." I hung up before he could say more. Then I went back to my files. Saturday arrived with warm, buttery sunlight pouring through the glass windows. The sea was calm. The waves rolled in like quiet applause. At 10:02 a.m., David's black SUV pulled into my driveway. Claire stepped out first, wearing a soft blue linen dress, hair curled just enough to look effortless. Liam followed behind, tall and quiet. He looked older than I remembered, but still had the same curious eyes. David emerged last. Wearing khakis and a casual polo shirt like this was a family barbecue. I opened the door and smiled. "Hi, Grandma Helen," Liam said, walking forward shyly. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, kneeling slightly to hug him. "Look at you, so big." He smiled, uncertain, but genuine. The adults stood behind him, stiff and waiting. "Come in," I said. "Lunch is ready." I'd prepared sandwiches, fresh fruit, and lemonade. Nothing fancy, just enough to let them know I was expecting company, but not enough to let them feel welcome. Claire raved over the view again, as if that would distract me. David sat across from me at the table, and for a few minutes we played the part of a happy family. Small talk, soccer updates, work stress. But it didn't last long. After lunch, as Liam wandered to the back deck to play with driftwood, Claire cleared her throat and leaned forward. "Helen, I hope you don't mind, but we've been thinking a lot about your future. I raised an eyebrow. My future? Yes, David said, jumping in. You've been through a lot, and it's amazing how well you've recovered, but, it's important to plan ahead. For what exactly? I asked. Claire tilted her head, adopting that concerned but smiling face I'd come to despise. Well, for long-term care, financial decisions, maybe setting up a formal support system, just in case. Just in case, I echoed. David nodded. We just want to make sure you're protected, that your wishes are respected, that, well, if anything were to happen, someone's there to help. Someone like you? I asked. He hesitated. If that's what you wanted, of course. Claire jumped in. Or we could bring in someone neutral, an estate attorney. We're not trying to take over, Helen. We're just trying to help. Help. That word again. I stood slowly and walked to the patio door. Liam, sweetheart, I called. Can you give us a few minutes? He looked up from his pile of driftwood, nodded, and moved farther down the path toward the shore. I turned back to my son and his wife. You want to talk about my future? I asked. Then let's talk about the past first. End. Claire shifted uncomfortably. David cleared his throat. Mom, we've already said we weren't as present as we should have been. We regret that. You regret not calling when I told you I had cancer? I asked, my voice calm but sharp. You regret ignoring me for 2 years? You regret letting me drive myself home from chemo while you were at soccer practice? He looked down. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that, I said. And while you were giving me space, Claire was building a case that I was mentally unfit. Claire paled. I don't know what you're talking about, she said. I walked over to the side table and picked up the manila envelope, pulled out the copy of the guardianship petition, set it on the table between us. David's face drained of all color. Claire's hands trembled. Would you like to explain this? I asked. They stared at the paper like it might bite them. David finally spoke. Mom, that was just a precaution. The lawyer said. You said I was getting lost while driving, that I was forgetting to pay bills, that I was paranoid. Claire's voice shook. We were trying to help. By lying to my neighbors? By questioning my doctors? By preparing legal documents to strip me of my rights? We never filed it, David whispered. We changed our minds. No, I said. Your lawyer told you it wouldn't hold up in court. That's why you didn't file it. But you wanted to. You tried. The silence that followed was heavy. Then Claire tried one more tactic. We're here now. We want to rebuild. We want Liam to know his grandmother. I leaned forward. Let me be very clear, I said. You had 2 years to show me you cared. You didn't. Now that there's a house and money, you suddenly remember I exist, but you don't get to decide who I trust, or how I live, or what I do with what Samuel left me. Claire opened her mouth, but I raised a hand. I've already spoken to lawyers. There are protections in place. If either of you tries to challenge my mental capacity again, there will be legal consequences. David stood, anger flashing across his face. You're choosing strangers over your own family? I'm choosing peace, I said, and the truth. They left 10 minutes later, faces flushed with humiliation and rage. Liam hugged me goodbye. I like your house, he said quietly. It feels calm. I smiled. That's because it island. End of quote. He ran back to the car, and I stood on the porch, watching them drive away. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid. I was ready. By the time the sun dipped beneath the horizon that evening, casting golden light over the waves, I had already made 2 more calls. The first was to Patricia Chen, my lawyer. The second was to Sandra Walsh, the woman who had managed Samuel's estate for 2 decades, and had, as it turned out, anticipated trouble long before I did. Both of them answered on the first ring. Patricia, calm and unshakable, said, Doreen, based on everything you've told me and the documents you showed David and Claire, we need to act. People who are willing to forge a guardianship petition are not going to stop just because they've been caught. Agreed, I said. We're going to file for a civil restraining order. Grounds, harassment, emotional coercion, and attempted elder fraud. I also want you to install a security system. Cameras, motion detectors, full perimeter coverage. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. We'll also be rewriting your will, with ironclad language, not only excluding them from any inheritance, but outlining direct consequences for any future attempts to contest your mental capacity, and will reinforce the existing protections from Samuel's estate. When I spoke to Sandra, she echoed the same sentiment. Your brother was smart, Doreen. He anticipated this. His will includes a no-contest clause. Any attempt to challenge your inheritance results in the challenger being cut off completely. No second chances. But I can take it further if you'd like. Yes, I said without hesitation. I want them nowhere near this house, or my life. Over the next few days, the house transformed. 2 professional technicians installed a full security system. 4 cameras, 1 above the front door, 1 on the deck, 2 at the back entrances. Sensors on every window, keypad entry, 24/7 recording stored off-site. They even installed an emergency panic button near my bed. You sure you're okay with all this? One of them asked, a young man named Jordan, looking up from his tablet. Seems a little intense. Heh. I fought cancer alone, I said, meeting his gaze. Now I fight with backup. He nodded and went back to work. The restraining order was processed faster than I expected. Patricia was efficient, ruthless even. She knew exactly what language to use. Claire and David Patterson were served on a Tuesday afternoon. At their home, with Liam likely watching through the front window. I expected the fallout within hours. It took 37 minutes. My phone rang. Claire. I didn't answer. Then it rang again. David. Then a third time. Blocked number. I let them all go to voicemail. The messages were what you'd expect. Confusion, outrage, desperation, denial. You can't be serious. This is family business, not court business. We were just trying to protect you. Liam doesn't deserve to be caught in the middle of this. You're blowing everything out of proportion. The guilt came wrapped in layers. Familial duty, concern for Liam, faux concern for my mental health. But I didn't fall for it. Not this time. Because every one of those voicemails had one thing in common. None of them said, "We're sorry." That Friday, I was pruning the hydrangeas near the side fence when I saw a flash of white through the trees. A car I didn't recognize. It slowed as it passed my driveway, then disappeared up the road. They were watching me. I told Patricia. She sighed. Doreen, I don't want to alarm you, but I think it's time to consider the worst-case scenario. If they believe they've lost legal access to your assets and they're desperate enough, they may try something impulsive, something illegal. What do I do? I asked. Document everything, every call, every strange car, every email. Keep a physical journal. We'll get you a burner phone, something unlisted, just in case. And if they show up at your door, you don't answer. You call the police. Immediately. The next morning, I found a letter in the mailbox. No stamp. No return address. Inside, a handwritten note from David. Mom, please don't do this. You're not thinking clearly. Claire is devastated. You've always taught me that family is the most important thing. Please let us talk before you take this any further. No apology. No accountability. Just more gaslighting. I tossed it into the fireplace. That night, I watched the flames consume the paper and felt a little stronger. 3 days later, Claire broke the order. She showed up at my front door in the middle of the afternoon, screaming, Doreen, open the door. You can't hide behind lawyers forever. We're family. I didn't answer. I pressed the panic button. The security system buzzed to life. Red lights blinking. Siren blaring from the alarm box installed near the driveway. I watched through the peephole as Claire backed away, startled. But she didn't leave. She threw a flower pot. It shattered against the front step. She kicked the door once, twice, then screamed into the empty air. You think you've won? This isn't over. The police arrived in 8 minutes. They arrested her on the spot. Violation of a court order. Destruction of property. I gave the officers access to the security footage. Open and shut, one of them said, shaking his head. Honestly, ma'am, this kind of thing, it's more common than you'd think. Families lose their minds over money. Oh, she didn't lose her mind, I replied. She just revealed it. That evening, David called again. This time, his voice wasn't smooth. It was raw. Mom, please. Claire's in jail. This is going too far. She didn't mean it. She violated a court order, I said. She's scared, he said. We didn't think you'd actually go through with it. And that's your problem, I said. You underestimated me. There was a pause. What can we do? He asked. How do we fix this? You don't, I said. Some things don't get fixed. Some lines, once crossed, don't disappear. Silence. Then a broken whisper. I didn't think you'd cut us off like this. I didn't think you'd try to steal my life while I was fighting to keep it. And then I hung up. That night, I sat on the back deck with Mary and a bottle of wine between us. I can't believe you went through all that, she said, shaking her head. You ever think about what would have happened if Samuel hadn't left you that house? All the time, I said. Do you regret finding out? I looked at the stars, crisp and clear above the Pacific. No, I said. Because now, I finally know who they really are. Mary poured more wine into my glass. And now you know who you are, too. I smiled. Yes, I said, now I do. The silence after a storm is always different from the silence before it. Before, the quiet had felt hollow, empty, a void waiting to be filled. Now, it was full, too full. The air around the house felt heavy, with the weight of everything that had been said, everything that had been revealed. I had stood my ground. I had drawn my lines. And I had won. But winning didn't feel the way I thought it would. It felt lonely. Not the sharp, abandoned kind of lonely I'd known during chemotherapy. Not the hollow ache of waiting for a call that never came. This was something else. A softer, sadder solitude. Because I had not only lost a son, I had lost the illusion of him. For years, I'd carried around the belief that maybe David was just busy, just distracted, that he cared, somewhere deep down, but didn't know how to show it. That Claire was the problem, that time would fix things. But now I knew. Time doesn't fix what people never intended to repair. And as much as I hated to admit it, I missed Liam. Not just his smile or his silly questions. I missed the possibility of him. The child I used to read to at bedtime. The little boy who used to pick up seashells and run to show me the shiniest ones. He was only 9. He didn't choose any of this. But now, because of the actions of his parents, and because of the boundaries I had to draw, he was gone from my life too. One evening, a week after Claire's arrest, I found myself sitting in the living room with an old photo album open on my lap. It was one of the few things I'd brought from my old house. Page after page of birthdays, Christmas mornings, first days of school. David at 3, smiling with cake all over his face. David at 10, standing next to a snowman we'd built together in the front yard. David at 17, awkward in his tuxedo before prom. And then, years later, Liam. Tiny hands, chubby cheeks. He looked like David once had. Same eyes, same dimples. I ran my fingers across the plastic page protectors, tears threatening but not falling. Then I closed the book and put it away, because memories are dangerous when you're trying to move forward. That Friday, my phone rang again. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something in my gut told me to. Hello? Grandma Helen? My breath caught in my throat. Liam? Yeah. I found your number on Dad's old phone. He left it on the counter while he was making dinner. There was a long pause. I'm not supposed to call you. I know, I said gently. I'm glad you did anyway. He was quiet for a moment, then asked, Are you mad at me too? That broke something in me. Oh, sweetheart, no, never. I could never be mad at you. This isn't your fault. I miss you, he whispered. I miss you too, I said. So much. Another pause. Mom says you don't love us anymore, that you're punishing us. She's wrong, I said. I love you. I always will. But sometimes grown-ups do things that hurt each other, and then we have to protect ourselves. Will I ever see you again? The lump in my throat nearly choked me. I don't know, I said honestly, but I hope so. I really hope so. He sniffled. I still have that shell you gave me, the one from the big beach. I keep it in my drawer. I remember that day, I said. You found it all by yourself. You were so proud. Yeah, he said softly. I still am. Then, from somewhere behind him, I heard David's voice. Liam? Who are you talking to? I gotta go, Liam said quickly. Bye, Grandma. Bye, baby, I whispered. Be good. Be strong. The line went dead, and I sat there, phone in hand, and wept. Not because of the anger, or the betrayal, or the lies, but because I missed a little boy who still believed love could outlast everything. Later that night, I wrote a letter. I didn't know if I would send it, but I needed to write it. Dear Liam, I want you to know that you are loved. No matter what anyone tells you, that will always be true. Adults make mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes mean people have to stay apart for a while. But I never stopped loving you. I never will. I hope one day, when you're older, you'll read this and understand. Love, Grandma Helen. I folded it, placed it in an envelope, and tucked it in the drawer beside my bed, because some words aren't meant to be mailed. They're meant to wait for the right time and the right heart. 6 weeks passed. The sound of the ocean, once a backdrop to my worry, now played like a lullaby. The wind softened, the waves slowed, and my heartbeat, for the first time in what felt like years, found its rhythm again. There were no more threatening letters, no more calls, no more doorbell rings in the middle of the day that made me flinch. Claire's face hadn't appeared at my front step since the police escorted her away, red-faced and screaming about family and loyalty. The security system stayed armed, of course, and I still checked the cameras each night before bed, but it had become habit now, routine, not fear. Mostly, I was just still. And in the stillness, I started to breathe again. Each morning, I woke early, made coffee, and stepped onto my deck barefoot. I'd sit wrapped in a shawl, hands warming against the mug, and watch the waves roll in, over and over, like forgiveness from something larger than me. I joined Mary Evans' pottery class on Tuesdays. She made me laugh so hard one afternoon I dropped a whole tray of unfinished mugs. She just shrugged and said, "Well, at least you didn't drop yourself, which is what I usually do." We laughed so loud they kicked us out of class early. On Thursdays, I started volunteering at the local animal shelter. The dogs didn't care about my past. The cats weren't interested in betrayal. They just wanted to be held, and I had plenty of love to give. On Sundays, I started hosting quiet tea on the deck, with a few neighbors, Mary, of course, and sometimes Helen from 2 streets over, or the young couple from the cottage at the end of the bluff. We didn't talk about heavy things. We brought homemade scones, swapped books, shared gardening tips. It was simple, easy, honest, and I realized one morning, as I folded fresh linens in the guest room, that I hadn't thought about David or Claire in several days. Not once. Not until Mary said something. We were walking the beach with Buddy, her golden retriever who was more sand than fur these days. He bounded ahead, chasing seagulls that never gave him a chance. "I ran into Maria yesterday," she said, adjusting her sun hat. "She used to live near your old place, right?" "Yes," I said. "Nice woman. Always kept her roses perfect. She told me something I thought you should know. About David." I slowed my pace. "What about him?" "He lost his job." I stopped walking. Mary kept going a few steps, then turned around when she realized I wasn't beside her anymore. "You didn't know?" I shook my head slowly. "After everything that happened," she continued gently. Claire's arrest, the restraining order, the lawyer stuff it got out. The firm didn't like the attention. They offered him a quiet resignation in exchange for not making it worse. What about Liam? Claire took him. Moved in with her mother in Arizona. And David? Couch hopping, I think. Rumors say he's staying with old college friends. The divorce is messy, lots of lawyers involved. They're fighting over custody, but Claire has the upper hand since. Well, she's the one with the child and the roof. I nodded slowly, absorbing every word like a weight settling on my shoulders. I thought you'd want to know, she added, touching my arm lightly. I did want to know. But I didn't know why. Later that afternoon, I drove back to my old neighborhood. I don't know what pulled me there. Nostalgia, curiosity, maybe guilt, maybe grief. The street was exactly as I remembered it, but somehow smaller, less alive. My old house stood there, unchanged and unwelcoming. The porch paint was chipping, the shutters hung crooked. The grass, once my pride and joy, had turned brittle and brown. A plastic "For Sale" sign stood lopsided in the yard, the lettering faded and peeling. No sign of life behind the windows. I parked across the street and stared at the place I'd spent 27 years building a life in. A life filled with birthday parties, Christmas dinners, sick days, school projects, and silent treatments. A life that had felt real for so long until the silence swallowed it whole. Mrs. Rodriguez came out to water her front garden. She saw me and lit up. "Doreen," she called. "Oh my God, you look so good, Mia, so peaceful." And one. I stepped out of the car and walked over. "They let the house go?" I asked softly. She nodded, wiping her hands on her apron. "Foreclosure, about 2 months ago. After the job and the police thing, I think everything unraveled. Do you know where they are now?" Claire moved back in with her mother. "She has Liam. David. No one really knows. I think he's trying to find work, but after all that, it's not easy." There was a long silence. "And Liam?" I finally asked. Her eyes softened. "I see him on weekends sometimes. When David picks him up for visits, he always looks sad, quiet kid, very sweet." I looked away, blinking hard. "He used to run through this street like it was his kingdom," I whispered. "Chalk drawings, water balloons, scraped knees." "He loved you," she said. I could always tell. "He still loves you." I nodded, throat tight. "Thank you. You did what you had to do, Doreen. Don't forget that." Back home, I wandered the rooms of the beach house like a ghost, touching memories without letting them settle. I opened the drawers of the guest bedroom and found the letter I'd written to Liam weeks ago. Still sealed, still waiting. I sat on the bed and reread it. The words were simple, heartfelt. The kind of truth I wish someone had told me when I was 9 and the world felt too complicated. I didn't mail it. Not yet. But I moved it. From the drawer beside my bed to the small wooden box on the guest nightstand, right beneath the ceramic bird Mary had painted for me, in case one day he comes. And he wants to know. That night, I dreamed of David, not the man in his 30s, full of silence and ambition, not the husband in the polo shirt, sitting across from me planning my future for me. I dreamed of the boy with freckles and bright eyes who used to beg me to let him stay up past bedtime. The boy who once made me a necklace out of macaroni and glitter. He didn't speak in the dream, but he looked at me with something that felt like remorse. When I woke up, I didn't cry. Not that time. I just sat on the deck with my coffee, watching the tide roll in and out. The ocean didn't hold grudges. It erased footprints, smoothed sharp edges, wore down even the hardest rock over time. I wondered if maybe that's what healing really looked like. Not forgetting, not forgiving too fast, but simply letting the edges soften until they didn't cut anymore. That evening, I made a new shelf in the hallway. On it, I placed the photo of Liam holding the seashell, a candle I bought from the farmer's market, the first mug I made in pottery class, a little lopsided, and a small card that simply said, "The past is not your fault, but the future is your choice." Time passed without announcement. There was no grand ceremony, no loud turning point. Just days, one after another, stitched together by small acts of healing. I no longer looked over my shoulder in grocery stores. I no longer flinched when the phone rang. And slowly, like the tide returning to a beach left dry for too long, I began to feel safe. Safe enough to hope. It started, oddly enough, with a magazine article. I was at the dentist's office of all places, thumbing through an old issue of Coastal Living, when a small sidebar caught my eye. It was about a nonprofit in San Diego that ran volunteer companionship programs for cancer patients without local family. The headline read, "No one should fight alone." I tore the page out. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with the article spread in front of me, staring at those 6 words. They hit something inside me, something still sore, something still tender, because I had fought alone. I had watched women in that oncology wing hold their daughters' hands. I had seen husbands spoon soup into the mouths of wives who couldn't feed themselves. I had walked myself to every single appointment, coat clutched tightly, pretending I was fine. And yet, I survived. What if I could be that someone for another woman now? The next morning, I called the number in the article. I expected a voicemail, maybe a few bureaucratic hoops. What I got instead was a warm-voiced woman named Trina, who answered on the second ring and sounded like she'd been waiting for me all along. "Would you like to come in?" she asked. 3 days later, I was sitting in a small office with bright sunlight, framed quotes on the walls, and the smell of lavender drifting through a nearby diffuser. Trina smiled at me. "We're not looking for superheroes," she said. "Just people who understand what it's like to sit in that chair alone." "I remember every detail," I whispered. "Every chemo session, every hallway, every empty waiting room seat beside me." She reached across the desk and touched my hand. "Then you're exactly who we need." By the end of the month, I was a registered volunteer. My first companion patient was a 71-year-old woman named Loretta, breast cancer, no children. Her husband had died 2 years ago. She was scared, but she tried to hide it behind jokes. She reminded me of myself. I met her every Thursday at the treatment center. I held her hand. I brought her ginger candies. I made her laugh when the drugs made her too nauseous to eat. And when her hair started to fall out, I took her to my old wig shop and helped her find one with just the right bounce. She cried in the parking lot. So did I. We weren't family by blood. But sometimes the deepest bonds come from the wounds we survive together. That winter, I launched a small local initiative quietly, without fanfare. I called it the Second Seat Project. The idea was simple. Pair one volunteer with one patient who has no local support, one chair, one hand to hold, one cup of soup, one kindness at a time. I funded it using part of the money Richard left me. It felt right. His death had given me freedom. It was time that freedom gave someone else comfort. Helen was the first to join me. Then Mary. Then 4 others from the book club. Word spread through church groups, libraries, yoga studios. Within 6 months, we had over 40 volunteers serving patients across the county. The clinic director told me we'd change the energy of the whole building, that people smiled more, that patients arrived less tense, that nurses felt less burdened. I just nodded and said, "That's what a second chair does." I never saw Claire again. David wrote me 1 letter, typed, 2 pages, apologizing, explaining, denying, regretting, hoping, the usual. I never wrote back. I forgave him in silence, but I didn't forget. And I didn't go back. Liam wrote me too, twice, in his handwriting. Messy, emotional, painfully honest. The second letter included a photograph. It was him on the beach somewhere, holding a shell up to the camera. On the back, he'd written, "I found another one like yours. I remember. I still remember. I keep it on my desk. Sometimes, I still dream of his voice calling me Grandma. Sometimes I answer. Now, I walk the beach every morning. Sometimes I find shells. Sometimes, I just walk. Each wave that breaks reminds me we can't stop what comes, but we can choose how we stand in it. With open arms, with steady feet, with an extra chair beside us, waiting for someone who needs it. And I've learned that's enough. From the moment I moved into the beach house in Malibu, I thought what I'd inherited from Samuel was security. A roof over my head, a sea view, enough money to not worry about the next bill. But over these months, I've come to see there was something else deeper. Something Samuel left me that no money, no lawsuit, no restraining order could ever take away. It's the inheritance of truth. The inheritance of knowing who I am. That morning, I woke to pink light over the Pacific, early enough that the air still held the salt and quiet. I sat on the deck with a cup of coffee, steam twisting in the wind, feeling the old gratitude in my bones. I thought about how far I'd come, from a woman afraid to answer the phone, to someone who holds her head high when doors open and cameras record and obligations are denied. What I inherited was a kind of dignity, and I guard it fiercely. Mary stopped by around 10, with Buddy in tow and a basket of fresh fruit. The lemons smelled bright, the peaches soft. She smiled, helping me carry things in. "Thinking of something special today?" she asked, seeing me pause with a jar of sea salt in my hand. "Just thankful," I said. She laughed gently. "You've earned that." We sat at the kitchen table. I sliced peaches. She cut grapes. Buddy lay in a patch of sun, eyelids heavy. I told her about a dream I'd had. Samuel, younger, thinner, standing among wildflowers on a hill I'd never seen, holding my hand. He said nothing, just looked at me, proud. When I woke, I wept, because I understood. He wasn't angry. He didn't lie. He did what he could, even in death, to make right what was broken. Later, I signed papers with Patricia Chen, papers that reorganized my will. I included protection for the Second Seat project, ensuring that it would continue even if I were to be gone. I left instructions: volunteers to keep holding hands in waiting rooms, funds to help pay wigs, rides to treatment. Something simple, something human. That's my legacy now, not just property, not just money, but people. Comfort, compassion. The kind of inheritance that doesn't require courtrooms or signed papers to see. That afternoon, I visited Loretta at the treatment center. She smiled when she saw me, and for a moment, her face was lit with hope. We took a walk by the garden of the clinic. She leaned on my arm. "Thank you," she said softly, "for showing up." "Thank you for letting me," I answered. Loretta said something that stuck with me. "You gave me something I hadn't believed in months, that someone cared, that I mattered." I drove home slowly, windows down so the ocean air tasted like salt, like possibility. Liam's letters lay on the desk. I looked at them, smiling at his messy handwriting, at the shell he held in the photo. I don't know when I'll see him again. Maybe one day soon. Maybe not. But I know now that whatever path we take, what I've built here, my peace, and my truth is mine to keep. That night, I sat out on the deck under stars. Buddy curled at my feet, Mary beside me. The ocean whispered. The light from the moon danced across the waves. I thought of Claire and David, of betrayal and silence, and of all the nights I sat alone clutching that purse strap, waiting for a call. I thought of every woman in the treatment center who looked around and saw empty seats beside her. I lifted a glass of wine not to drown sadness, but to toast survival, to truth, to inheritance of a different kind. What if legacy is not about how much you leave behind, but about how much love you give, how much presence you offer, how much courage you choose when everything else tries to silence you? If you've stayed with me this far, thank you. If you've ever felt alone, or forgotten, or like you were fighting a battle without a support, I see you. You deserve someone who shows up. You deserve someone who listens. And maybe, just maybe, you can be that someone for someone else. There's a hush that falls after storms. Not the kind filled with fear, but with something else. Resolution. It's quieter than anger, softer than relief. It's the moment you realize you're still here, whole in ways you didn't think you could be. I found that hush creeping in around me over the months since the confrontation. It arrived in little moments, light spilling through curtains, laughter in pottery class, a neighbor bringing over fresh basil. Not the big gestures I'd once longed for, but the ones that stick with you, hold you up. One Saturday morning, I stood in the garden, weeding among the lavender and salvia, the kind of quiet day where everything smells of earth and possibility. Helen from down the road walked over, carrying an armful of seedlings she wanted to share. "Thought you might like these," she said, offering a tray of young marigolds and daisies. "They brighten up your walkway." I smiled, took them. "Thank you. I want people who walk up here to feel welcomed." Helen nodded. "You've done that already." I leaned down and planted the marigolds along the stone path. Their orange blossoms looked like little suns. Later, I made coffee and sat on the front porch, listening to the gulls overhead. The phone buzzed. It was Liam again. He'd sent a video. Him at school, painting in art class. His brush strokes were thick, full of color. There was a wide grin on his face. I watched it, leaned back against the wood of the porch swing, and felt something gentle stir in my chest. "Good job," I whispered at the screen. Then I set it down before tears came. That afternoon, I opened my journal, the one I started after moving in, the one that's still mostly blank, but wrote a note. "Dear self, you have done hard things. You have loved when you did not feel loved. You have protected your heart when it was under siege. This house, this life, is not what I expected. It is more. It is peace. It is kindness. It is enough." I closed it softly. In the evenings, the sky over Malibu glowed peach and lavender. I sat on the deck, sometimes with Mary, sometimes alone, sipping ginger tea. I watched the horizon, thinking, I am here. I've survived. I've built something that death and betrayal and fear could not steal. And maybe that's my greatest legacy. I wake up the morning of my birthday, in 2025, sunlight spilling in through the windows, casting golden stripes across the floor. I lie there for a moment, listening to the ocean, to the quiet house, to the steady beat of my heart. 63 years old now. More years behind me than ahead? Maybe. But here in this light, I feel more alive than I've dared in a long time. I pad into the kitchen. Mary's gift waiting on the counter, a small wrapped box, and a card that says, "Hope blooms in new soil." I unwrap it. A delicate ceramic bird, its wings curved as though it's about to take flight. Mary explains she made it in pottery class, painted it with the blues and greens of the ocean, so when I look at it, I'll remember that I'm still free to soar. And I do remember. It's been months since the storm, weeks since Claire was arrested, months since David lost his job, since the foreclosure sign went up, since our last strained hug goodbye. Liam's letters come occasionally now, postcards, art class photos, shell pictures. I don't expect more than that. I don't reach for more. I've learned that sometimes love means letting go of expectations so you don't suffer for what others won't give. I walk through the house, room by room. The sunlight warms the floors. I brush my fingers across the surfaces, Samuel's hardwood banister, the teak beams in the kitchen, the guest bedroom, where the shell letters rest in a drawer. Each corner holds a memory. Not just pain, but also determination, survival, moments of wonder, moments when I thought I couldn't go on, and I did. That morning, I take a long walk with Buddy at sunrise. The air is crisp. The sky is a canvas of pinks and golds. I stop at the bluff overlooking the ocean. Waves crash softly, but with power. I close my eyes and breathe in the salt and wind and possibilities. They flood me with peace. Not the loud peace of victory, not triumphant, but soft and sure. At noon, I open the Second Seat Project's new office. It's small, just a few chairs, a shelf with books, pamphlets about support resources, a bulletin board with photos people have sent, smiles and hands holding hands, a poster that reads, "You are not alone." I arrange fresh flowers in a vase. A neighbor drops by, helps carry in new chairs. We laugh over off-color jokes. We make warm tea for people who come to ask how they can help. In the evening, I host just a few friends at the beach house, a quiet dinner on the deck. Mary and Helen, a few volunteers from the shelter. The ocean glimmers pink under the setting Sunday. We pass around dishes, talk about what's healing, what's hopeful, what's ahead. Someone suggests a retreat for people who've been through treatments alone. I smile, thinking maybe that's something I might even lead one day. After dinner, I step out onto the porch. The sky is deep purple now, stars beginning to blaze. I hear the sea below. My heart doesn't ache with loneliness anymore. It pulses with something else. Gratitude. Not because everything ended perfectly, but because I survived what should have broken me. Because I chose truth over denial, dignity over silence, compassion over bitterness. I think about Claire and David. I think about all that was lost. But also about what I've gained. Self-respect, true friends, purpose. About the woman I am now, stronger for having been broken. About the world I've built around me, piece by piece. And so, I look out into that vast Pacific, waves shimmering in moonlight, and I whisper to myself, this is the life I choose, the home I earn, the light I leave behind. Morning light filtered through sheer curtains as I awoke. I could hear the sea murmurs through the windows, soft, persistent. It was a reminder. Even when everything else is stripped away, the ocean will still rise. The tides will still come in. I stretched, slipped out of bed, and padded across the wooden floor to the kitchen. My slippers squeaked, almost imperceptibly. I made coffee, the aroma filling the room with warmth. A familiar ritual. Something I once thought I'd lost. On the counter lay a letter with Liam's drawing peeking from the envelope. His messy block letters, a shell colored carefully by hand. "Grandma, I miss you. I made this for you." My heart squeezed. I wrote back later, using thick paper, careful strokes. I didn't talk of courts or betrayals. I talked of shells, of sunsets, of how proud I was that he still remembered, how someone loves him unconditionally. After breakfast, Mary came by. She carried a tray of lemon bars, the kind that curled at the edges, slightly overbaked, but homey. We sat on the deck, feet on weathered planks, looking at the water from a distance. "Do you ever wonder," Mary asked, stirring her tea, "if people like David and Claire will understand what they lost someday?" I looked at her, thought of childhood promises, of all the chances they didn't take. "I think maybe," I said, "they'll remember, but only in pieces. Not the whole me, just the parts they needed." Mary nodded, understanding. I spent midday helping Loretta at the treatment center. She'd had a rough night, nausea, fatigue, but her smile was still there. She laughed when I told her about Mary's overbaked lemon bars. She asked after Liam. I told her he had drawn shells again. She paused. Then, surprised herself, she took my hand and said, "Helen, meeting you has reminded me that someone out there still sees me as a person, not a patient." That pulled something in me. The knowledge that sometimes what we need most is just to be seen. By late afternoon, I was organizing the records and financial documents with Patricia. I reviewed the updated will, made sure nothing vague remained. The protections Samuel included were strong, but we added layers, clearer definitions, more oversight, named trustees with instructions to act if anyone tries to breach the terms. It wasn't pleasant, but necessary. I could feel the weight of every word I wrote, every clause I signed. They were stones in the wall I built around my peace. Evening came. I cooked something simple. Roasted vegetables, herbs from my garden, bread fresh from the bakery. I ate on the deck, under the purple blue sky as the sun slipped away. A neighbor's dog barked in the distance. A gull called overhead. The world was alive with small sounds. I thought of the path that had led me here. Cancer diagnosis, betrayal, legal battles, nights alone, tears, but also moments of kindness. Mary's laughter, Loretta's trust, Liam's shells, the sea that kept whispering at the edge of everything. Before bed, I took out my journal. Flipped through earlier entries, the ones written in fear, ones soaked in pain and doubt. I read how I've grown, how I found strength I didn't know I had. Then I wrote, I have lost much, but I have gained light. I have learned who I am when stripped of everything I thought defined me. I choose honor. I choose presence. I choose love, in all its strange, stubborn ways. Oh, I closed the journal, lay back, listening to the sea outside the window, steady, unrelenting. And in that moment I felt whole enough. The morning air was cool, edged with salt and promise. I woke to the gentle hum of waves against the shore and sunlight dancing through the curtains. Today wasn't just another day. I could feel something shift. Over the past weeks, the tension had eased. My heart still carried hurt, but it no longer ached with desperation. I'd found strength in self-trust. I'd built a life anchored by truth, compassion, and peace. But there was one decision I needed to make, a full one. Not half-open, not maybe someday. Would I ever invite David and Claire, and perhaps Liam, back into my life? On what terms? Under what conditions? I had conversations with my lawyers, yes. I reviewed the restraining order. I double-checked the will. But legal safety is different from emotional safety. Just because I can open the door doesn't mean I should. That afternoon, I sat on the porch swing with Mary, the ocean stretching wide and infinite in front of me. Do you ever regret cutting them off completely? Mary asked, her voice soft. I looked at the horizon, at the light dancing on the waves. I don't regret protecting myself, I said. Being alone doesn't mean being lonely, but staying where I'm not respected, where my dignity is compromised? That wasn't alive. Mary nodded. And Liam? She asked. What about your relationship with him? A small weight settled in my chest. The little boy, the grandchild, still mattered deeply. He deserves me, I said. But I need him in my life in a way that's real. Not because of guilt, not under terms I can't accept. End quote. That meant, if they wanted contact, it would be on my terms. Respectful, honest, without lies or manipulation. Later that day, David called again, a careful voice. Mom, he said, I've thought a lot. I know I hurt you. Claire and we were wrong. I miss you. I just want to see Liam sometimes, if that's possible. I listened through the phone, waves rolling quietly outside, my heart slow but sure. David, I said, thank you for saying that. I've thought about this too. He said nothing. I could hear Claire in the background, maybe. I want us to build something new, I continued. Not go back to what was broken. If Liam ever wants to spend time with me, I'll welcome that. But I need trust. I need transparency. And I need you both to understand that I will not let you control me or question my word again. There was a pause. I understand, David said. We're sorry. His voice broke. I don't expect forgiveness immediately. I hope you can believe me someday. I do believe you can try, I said. That's a start. End of tell. And I asked one thing. Would you agree to stay away unless you come honestly? No pretending? No guilt? No veiled threats? Yes, he said. I ended the call with peace in my chest. Not relief, because relief is passing, but with clarity. That night, Liam's letters came again. 2 postcards. One had a shell drawn in blue and gold. The other, I painted today. I think of you when I paint. I hope you think of me too. I held them in my hands, tears behind my eyes. Love is strange sometimes. It lives in postcards and shells. It waits in small promises and broken beginnings. I looked out the window at the moon, casting paths of silver across the water. I thought of everything that had been stolen from me, time, presence, trust. But I also thought of what I'd built back, a life of choice, a garden of my own tending, friends who became family, kindness that flowed without asking, purpose that grew from pain. I made my decision. I will keep a door cracked open for Liam. Perhaps a weekend here, a letter, a shell by the bedside. But beyond that, I'll protect my peace first. I will allow respect, honesty, humility, not guilt, not deceit. I won't pretend the past didn't hurt. I won't let them rewrite what they tried to steal. My dignity, my voice, my worth, those are no one's to take. The ocean outside whispered what I had learned. Some people are in your life to teach you what strength looks like. Some to show you who you can be when you love yourself. And some, sadly, are chapters you close not because you hate them, but because you love yourself enough to stop letting them shape your story. I rose from the porch swing, set the postcards on the table, with the ceramic bird on the nightstand. Light from the moon rested on everything. I breathed deeply, filling my lungs with salt air. This is my choice. My terms. My peace. It had been 2 weeks since that call with David. In that time, the world had moved quietly around me. The waves still came and went. The garden bloomed in late summer color, and I began each morning with a new kind of stillness. But memory has a way of revisiting you in unexpected ways. That Sunday morning, I opened an old leather-bound journal I hadn't touched since before the diagnosis. Inside were pages I'd written during the early days of chemotherapy, raw, scattered, filled with fear and strength in equal measure. Day 3 of chemo. The air smells like plastic, my hands shake. No one called today. I told the nurse I had someone picking me up. I lied. She knew. I think everyone knows I'm alone. Day 27. I miss being touched. Not romantically, just a hand on mine. Someone brushing my hair. Someone saying, "You're not doing this alone." Day 56. Marcus didn't answer. Again. Ariella texted something about being slammed. I want to hate them, but mostly I just feel invisible. I closed the book slowly. That version of me, the broken, hopeful, quietly suffering woman, was still a part of me, but she wasn't all of me anymore. I had rebuilt something stronger on her ashes. Later that afternoon, I received a letter in the mail. Not an email, not a voicemail, a handwritten letter. It was from Ariella. "Doreen, I don't expect forgiveness, but I want to try honesty, at least once. When we ignored you, I told myself we were busy. But the truth is, I didn't know how to be around sickness. I didn't want to feel helpless, so I did nothing. And that was worse than useless. It was cruel. I watched Marcus spiral with guilt, but never act. And I made it worse by validating his silence. I never thought we'd lose everything. I thought, if we could just control you, manage you, redirect you, maybe we could fix our guilt without facing it. Now I know that was manipulation. It was abuse. If you never want to see me again, I understand. But Liam still paints you. He still talks about you. I am not asking you to forgive me, but thank you for protecting yourself. You taught me something I couldn't have learned any other way. Claire. I held the letter in my hands for a long time, not reading it again, just holding it. Was it sincere? I didn't know. But it was vulnerable, and that mattered. I didn't respond immediately. I didn't rush into magnanimity or pretend the hurt had vanished. That's not how healing works. But I did write one short note. To Liam. Dear Liam, I received your postcard and smiled for a long time. Thank you for thinking of me. I think of you when I water my garden, when I walk the beach, and when I see birds you would probably give funny names to. I hope one day you can visit again. Maybe for pancakes in funny shapes. Love always, Grandma Doreen. That was all. No explanations. No justifications. Just love. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It's not pretending. It's choosing not to let the past define the present. It's saying, this happened, and I survived, and I still choose peace. One morning, walking the beach with Mary and Buddy, I told her about the letter. Do you think you'll ever let them visit again? She asked. Maybe, I said, but only when it won't cost me peace. And for now, that was enough. I wake early this morning. The sky is a soft blend of pinks and oranges, as though the horizon itself is catching fire just to light up this moment. I walk out onto the deck barefoot, Buddy padding behind me, lungs filling with salt air. It feels different, lighter, quieter, like the world has finally taken a breath. I pour a cup of coffee, steam spiraling into the dawn. In the kitchen, the postcard from Liam lies next to the ceramic bird Mary made. I run my finger over the shell he painted. Remember the day I found one just like it on the wet sand. Today is not marked on any calendar. There's no legal hearing, no confrontation, just this moment, just me, the ocean, and one choice. I wander down toward the cliff edge where the bluff drops off and the Pacific stretches forever. Wildflowers lean over the edge. The breeze carries the cry of gulls, the crash of waves below. I stand at the threshold where land meets sea, where the solid gives way to the fluid. I press both hands to the railing. The wood is warm from the sun rising behind me. I close my eyes and breathe in the wind. Let the salt sting my nose. Let the brightness fill me up. I think of all that I've lost. The years I cried in silence. The days I held hope close so tightly it almost broke me. The betrayal, the legal battles, the loans, the worry, the trying to believe that family meant something when everything said otherwise. But I also think of what I've gained. A garden that thrives. Friends whose hands are honest. A project that holds other hearts when their world shakes. The letters from Liam. The shell he keeps. The truth I now live by, that my worth was never in what others thought of me, but in who I choose to be. I turn away from the ocean and walk back up to the house. The morning sun slips over the roof, warming the windows. I reach the front door, pause, and look at the shell boxes on the table. The mug from pottery class, the bird statue, the photos pinned to the corkboard in the hallway. These are my anchors. Not the old life, not the betrayal, not the silence, but the presence, the small joys, the resilience, the love I have for myself, and the compassion I can offer others. Mary knocks on the door a little later, carrying fresh lemons in a basket. Her laughter is gentle when I answer. We sit on the deck, sipping lemonade in the Sunday. We watch Buddy chase seagulls. We exchange memories, funny, tender, bruised. Today feels right, she says, letting the lemony slice float in her glass. It does, I say. The day stretches ahead unhurried. I think of maybe painting again, maybe going on another pottery class, maybe reading by the window, letting the ocean speak its language. I think of Liam again, of postcards, shells, letters that say, I remember. I hope one day I'll see him again. Not because of guilt or pressure, but because we both deserve what's real. As the sun begins to dip, painting the sky in gold and lavender, I stand at the porch rail and watch. Waves crash far below. I say the words I've rehearsed once, twice, in my head. I have fought for myself. I have loved myself. I have built peace. And in the hush between one wave and the next, I know they are more than words. They are my life. What did you feel while listening to this story all the way through? If it touched your heart, leave the number 1 inch the comments. If you didn't feel connected to it, feel free to write 0. Every piece of feedback means a lot to me, because it's thanks to you that I can keep going. It's from your responses that I draw the energy to tell the next chapter a new story is coming, even deeper, even more moving. And I truly hope you'll be there to listen with me.